Well, thank you, Groover and Cascadia and James and all the team here at Fort Walla Walla. Thank you all for coming out. It looks like spring has sprung out there, you know, so we feel like should be out planting cabbage seeds or something here. But I'm glad you're here, and a lot of familiar faces and family reunion here because my in-laws, although I think it's on my line too, all connected to the Walla Walla Morash clan and others of that background, and making some new friends. And we turned out we harvested next to each other in 1967, 1,000 years ago. And so it's just been fun to make all those connections, reconnect. So I'm on the upside of a little cold bug, and so, you know, pardon the fact that I might have to clear my voice or my nose or something at some point in time, but I'm an old school teacher and a believer in the show must go on, you know, and I can't remember, after 35 years of teaching, I'm not sure I scarcely missed a day. And I looked at the paperwork one time, it's like, I could have retired 20 years ago. I mean, why did I keep doing all this? But yeah, the show must go on, and what a great topic that we have when it relates to heritage. And I was telling James, you're kind of in the mecca of all the major eras of history for our region, going back to Native American origins down to you know, pioneer settlement, exploration. I'm thrilled to hear about the program coming up on the Pacific Coast Railway surveys. That's an area of special interest to me. And I've just been writing recently, actually, about those lithographs. I think I have one of them on the program I'm going to show you here momentarily that relates to our area in farming. And yeah, it's just great to be here because the topic that relates to agricultural origins and flavorful authenticity is tightly linked to this area. There's all kinds of firsts, and this museum is full of those. First this, first that, the railroad. Oh, how impressive it is to see that engine here across the way, and I can't wait to come back at the grand opening of that. Missionary history, I mean, there's just all these things. But of special significance for us today, and I have to say, just in terms of current events, is there anything more important in the news today than food security and health and safety in our food supply and production and tariffs and exports and imports and the farm economy? I mean, it's the backbone of life. People in the greater society and our urban areas, I often think, take for granted the labors of the land that truly make all of this possible. And of course, this goes back to even the biblical origins of the sanctity of earth care and farming from the beginning of recorded history. So the chance to share a little about that with you here is a great opportunity, and thank you again for the invitation to come. So I'll start by sharing with you a photograph of the place where my new friend Jim and I were farming many decades ago, a lifetime ago actually. This is on the Palouse River, but the crop is from here. How do you like that? This is an imported crop from way back, Hudson's Bay time, when Tom Williams was here, you know, maintaining that incredible historic tie to the very origins of agriculture for the Pacific Northwest. As I told you, I'm an old teacher, right? So I got to do show and tell. So I tell teacher candidates all the time, the two best, I don't care about all chat boxes and artificial intelligence and all the wonderful things they have today for schools. There's nothing better than show and tell and dot to dot, right? And you know, keeps kids busy and interested. So I'm sharing with you here the fruit of what you see growing on that flat. That was nicknamed Hudson's Bay wheat. And as you'll see when we go through the pictures how we came to have this happen, it is wrapped up deeply with this part of the country that we call home. And I can't think any better place to start, Tom, than letting you pass it around. I'll start there with you bet. And so I want to talk a little about the origins of agriculture in our region, which goes far beyond our immediate region when you see that pathway, and talk about the nature of significance with heritage grains for health and heritage. By the way, there's a lot of names that are thrown about today that are variously defined, and I guess we'll have a little time afterwards for the question and answers if you want. People define ancient grains, heritage grains, heirloom grains, all in different ways. The USDA basically says grains prior to World War II era, 1940s, 50s, are considered heritage grains. Now, of course, William Spillman, of all places at Washington State College, developed the modern science of plant genetics, and he was there in the 1890s and really started his hybridization work after the turn of the century. So if you take the USDA definition, you actually have a half century of hybrids that are, according to them, heritage grains. That's a little different than my definition, but who am I to argue with the U.S. Department of Agriculture? But hey, it's America, right? So we can do what we think. What do we mean by perhaps a more doctrinaire definition of heirlooms or heritage grains? I like the word landrace. It's a German word, Land, and race. This relates to land strains of rich genetic diversity that adapted over many, many centuries to places all over the world where cereal grains were grown. So they looked somewhat different, you see, in the foothills of the Alps in Italy, say, than the plains north of Kiel in Germany, and what was growing beyond the flats and the white cliffs of Dover. Over time, plants adapted to climatic regions, to soil profiles, and they created a diverse expression in everything from yield, color of grain, hardness of grain, all the various ways that we classify grains. And many of the heritage grains, when mankind started naming these and when they became part of scientific nomenclature in the 16 and 1700s, they were given names. Brauwick wheat, Oderbrucher, Cicelos. They tend to be associated, you see, with places in the world. Way back, 16th century, this was widely known to people, that in fact there were this vast rainbow of landrace strains. And this is a poem from Thomas Tusser about husbandry, farming, back those many hundreds of years ago. He obviously got the point, didn't he? Because he weaves it into his poetry. White wheat or else red rivet white, for past all others the land that is light. White pollard or red that so richly is set, for land that is heavy as best you can get. Maine wheat, turkey wheat, perky wheat, I mean, they're all mentioned here. There are thousands of these land races, you see, that developed over many, many millennia that gave rise to the pre-hybridized varieties that were raised throughout the world in the ages leading up to our time of settlement. This is a very significant image to me. and started me on, I'm not sure if it's actually what started me on this quest, but it contributed to it. I told my kind host that I'd be sitting for most of this because I'm fighting this cold. I twisted my back, but I just get so invigorated by visiting about these important things with you. So I'm going to sit down, but it doesn't mean I'm not enthused about the subject matter. So what happened is that the last 10 years of my career in education, I was at Seattle Pacific University, and I was in charge of a teacher training program for educators in Washington. And every year I try to go to a different place for like the summer gathering of all the teacher candidates. I don't like doing the same thing year after year. And so we were living down in the Tacoma area, and speaking of historic Walla Walla Valley, Fort Walla Walla, Fort Vancouver, Fort Colville, all these places, Fort Nisqually is located over there. And I knew that they had kind of a pavilion building thing. So I went over to check it out. You know, can you fit a bunch of honorary teacher candidates here, and you know, how would this look? And because like you, interested in history, was visiting a little with the staff, and this guy says to me, yeah, well, but hey, Richard, this was more than a fur trading post, and you know, if you're a farm kid, you might be interested to know that all the records are upstairs here, because way back in the 1860s, when the government, the United States government, had to negotiate possession of the Hudson's Bay land claims that were all across the Pacific Northwest, where the forts were located. When the boundary was set in the 1840s, the British said, hey, listen, we're not just giving you all of these forts that are down here. You know, we need to be compensated. And so the largest collection of farms was actually in Puget Sound. There was a company called the Puget Sound Agricultural Company. And they didn't surrender their records, unlike most all of these other forts, because they wanted to present it for evidence in court. Now, the boundary, if you play a little bit of the chronology in your mind, I think 1846, isn't that when we set the Canadian boundary? Okay, so that stayed in litigation for year after year after year, and finally, guess who? 1860s, Abraham Lincoln says, we've got to solve this thing. This thing has been dragging on forever. And so they resurrected those records, and they had kept them at Fort Nisqually because of all the land that the Hudson's Bay Company had owned. And so my host over there said, you're welcome to look through these, because there's actually more stuff in here about farming than there is about fur trading. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I went upstairs, and sure enough, here's all the original records, and it's not perky wheat and turkey wheat and all that, but I mean, there were many references to grain. And being an old Eastern Washington farm kid, of course, that interested me just as much as entertaining a bunch of teacher educators, and so I kept up a friendship with those folks, and took it upon myself to try to do more than just say, oh yeah, that's an interesting thing, there were early farms here in the pioneer days. I wondered if we might get a living connection to those farms. And so one thing I found out was that, oh yes, thank you, Cascadia, this is the light somewhere, maybe not. Oh, that red thing? Aha! There he is, the governor of the Hudson's Bay Company. This was an international trader before globalization ever became a byword. This is Sir George Simpson, and he's the head of the London-based global concern Hudson's Bay Company, which, by the way, until, what was it, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, it ended, sadly. This was the longest continual capitalistic endeavor in world history. And they apparently closed the Hudson's Bay stores maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. But Sir George had quite a thing going. And this is a picture of him coming out. He made 2 trips in 1825 and 1826 because the Hudson's Bay Company had just consolidated and purchased American interests and the Scottish Northwest Company's interests and basically created a monopoly of fur trading posts in the Pacific Northwest. And he looked at the balance sheet, he looked at how to save money like any good businessman, and one thing crossed his mind, which was sending hamburgers all the way across the world to feed my workers is not a good idea. You guys have got to learn more than how to trap for fur-bearing animals. You've got to feed yourselves. And so he took off on his trip, and I'm guessing it might be in that canoe there is reference to a keg of soft white wheat that he brings with him that becomes the progenitor of the grain industry here for the Pacific Northwest. Now there's a lot of soft white wheats, aren't there? And so it also begs the question, well, just exactly what was it that he was bringing? Well, he brought lots of stuff. It wasn't just grain. He brought vegetable seeds. And we do have a lot of documentation on the vegetable seeds. He kept much better records because it wasn't just him doing this. He contracted vegetables and fruits out to Gordon Forsyth and other British seed companies that also kept records of what was sent here. And so it's a little easier if you're into flowers and fruits and squash and all that stuff. Today, Fort Vancouver, like Fort Walla Walla, thanks to the team here, is doing a good job recreating a lot of this. They have formal gardens where they're attempting to propagate some of the original strains, and you can see that. But this is the map that I find of special interest. This is showing our area here in eastern Washington. Here's the Canadian boundary. Here's the Columbia River. And he comes down, when Simpson comes down in these 2 trips in 1825 and 26, the first thing he does is said, we need to create more forts. We can't do all this out of Fort Vancouver. We need a fort here at Fort Colville. We're going to take over old Fort Nez Perces, Fort Walla Walla, and eventually they also established Fort Nisqually. They also acquired Fort Okanagan. I think that had been an Astorian fort. John Jacob Astor, the first American millionaire, had his eyes also on trade. But by the 1820s, Hudson's Bay Company basically was running the entire show here. I'm especially interested in our story here, Fort Nez Perces, Fort Walla Walla, and as you know, this is the, quote, old Fort Walla Walla, right? Not the military Fort Walla Walla that was here where the city is located. And when Simpson comes down, he sees this area and he realizes it certainly is a lot drier down here in our part of the country than over in Fort Nisqually. Fort Nisqually came to have substantial property, not just Fort Nisqually, but Fort Vancouver. The 1,500 acres is very close to Palouse Prairie Farm, 3,000 acres. That was near where the town of Toledo is today. But even though it might not sound like a lot with initially the 30 acres that was farmed upstream from the Walla Walla River, that becomes very important because of the genesis of grains for southeastern Washington. As I mentioned, over time, this becomes something of world significance because William Stillman is sent to Washington State College in the 1890s and really establishes the first modern science of agronomy. And thanks to his work with the USDA, if you dig deep enough, you can find in their reports from the 1880s, 1890s, and after the turn of the century, there are still a handful of people raising the original Hudson's Bay soft white grain. And they identify it as a white llamas wheat. And so I don't know where our bottle is going around here, but somewhere if you had that bottle, thanks. you know, you have not just an approximation of the grain, you have the literal descendant. Because guess what? Thanks to people like Scheuerman that are working to do crosses, because they're not, by the way, I'm the last person on earth who wants to criticize good people like William Scheuerman, but they're not out breeding for flavor. They're breeding to increase production and make shorter so it's easier to harvest and things like that. Tasting profiles really weren't part of the initial endeavor. More recently, that's become something. And so what they did was go out and start identifying what we would consider heirloom or heritage grains that could be used for hybridization stock. And I believe the year is 1914. I have this documented in the book, thanks Gruber for mentioning. I think the Palouse Heritage book is here in the bookstore. They sent out people all over the place trying to track down unadulterated lines of these original plantings. And about 1914, they found somebody in the Willamette Valley who was still raising the original Hudson's Bay White Llamas wheat. Only one. They could, and maybe there were more people doing it that had not reported it, but they only received a single accession that was sent to Washington, D.C., and I suppose here in Pullman. Scheuerman later went to work for the USDA in D.C. and probably took a lot of these with him. And because of that, we were able, through our good friends at WSU, tracking through the USDA Germplasm Center to see if it still existed. And I'm very happy to report that it did still exist. And so I became fascinated by the story of that grain and started growing out, which you can see in that opening slide of the small flat there, of the small farm that we operate up in the Palouse country. And maybe you've heard of this book, The Desert of Wheat. I'm pausing here because this book deserves an entire program just devoted to itself. Zane Grey, I don't know if you're a Zane Grey fan. I wasn't a big Zane Grey fan when I was a kid. I mean, there are a lot of shoot 'em up, bang up, you know, outlaw, Indian, all this stuff. But somebody said, hey, you know, who it was Alex McGregor, who many of you know. And Alex said, you know, you ought to read this book, The Desert of Wheat. He's writing a novel about farmers. And not just any farmers, farmers from southeastern Washington. And so, so I tracked this book down. Ultimately, by the way, I found Zane Grey's personal copy of this book. It was on an auction. No, I didn't buy it, but I conned some friends into buying it for the museum in Pasco. And this is just filled with these kind of lines. The book opens with some of this reference to Chris Dorn, the immigrant farmer. His father is a German, which isn't popular, you see, in World War I. So he's really trying to prove his patriotism. And he's a good farmer. Ultimately, he goes to war. And I'm not going to tell you how all that plays out. But at some point early in the narration, Zane Grey casts this picture of the significance of what farmers do. He sat up, he looked at the heavens, the twinkling white stars, away across the shadows, the dreaming hills with their precious rustling wheat meant more than a spirit could tell. Whence the first and original seeds? Who were the sowers back in the ages? The stars, the night, the dark blue of heaven hid their secret impenetrableness. Beyond them was the answer, perhaps peace. Material things lost their significance and were seen clearly. They couldn't last. But the grain, the land, the stars, they would go on with their task. Doesn't that make you want to be a farmer? I mean, you know, there's something more to, you know, and we all know in farming, believe you me, the headaches that come at the end of the week, at the end of the day, going to the tax man, finding the price of grain was down another nickel. But there's something you connect with that's incredibly vital and significant. isn't there. And again, sustaining really our entire civilization. There was a question here, and then this is kind of I'm about 2/3 over here, so don't worry, we'll still have a question and answer at the end, but if something on that is...
I was wondering if you could say something about the relative nutritional and flavor characteristics of that Hudson Bay original wheat.
Coming up.
There we go.
Yeah, thanks for the lead-in. The nutritional characteristics and flavor profiles have been part of what has motivated my interest. Thanks for asking. And so I do have a slide that particularly relates to the nutritional story.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
So you mentioned litigation. I'm sorry, I got here a little late. I don't know if you mentioned it before, but so the litigation then was because the United States was going to take all this land that the British had invested in, and so
the British agreed to the border, but the clause in the I'm trying to think of it. It might have just, we call it the Treaty of 1846. I think, I'm not sure what the formal name is, but there's a clause in there that says there shall be a market value evaluation made of Hudson's Bay properties in the Pacific Northwest, and that really turned it important because for all of us that are interested in the specifics, it's one thing to just say, oh yeah, there was a farm, by Walla Walla, or yeah, there was a farm by Toledo. Well, what does that mean? I mean, is it 1 acre? Is it 1,000 acres? I mean, is it where the town is? Is it 20 miles from the town? It's interesting to document these things and know. And so finally, in the 1860s, when Lincoln dispatched negotiators to complete this study, they sent, there were still people living in these places in the 1860s, and so they made measurements, they made maps, they took testimony, and so now we know exactly how much acreage was here, there, anywhere, and it really helps them document the story of where these things happen. Yeah, because they put a value on, like buildings, tools, right. So that exists. I found a copy of it. I'm glad you asked because that isn't a well-known aspect of Northwest history, and complete set of the evaluations are held by our State Historical Society in Tacoma at the archives, and I had never seen that. I didn't even know that existed. And they're not big volumes, but probably 60, 70 pages, and there's like 6 or 7 of them. And if you dig into those, and I have that summarized in the Palouse Heritage book.
And when was all that settled? Was that settled then?
It was settled right about the conclusion of the Civil War, 1864, 1865.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was wrapped up, and they did receive. And I mean, it was back and forth because the British wanted more, and the Americans were going to pay less, and ultimately it was resolved.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what do we mean by restorative agriculture? Again, those terms too get a little squishy, don't they? Restorative, regenerative, all kinds of words are bandied about in this day and age. And I've been trying to listen and learn from bright people like you who have experience in these things and come to some kind of consensus about what's meaningful. Not too much pioneering in that photograph, but Jim, that's the flat where we were at, okay? Yeah, that's up on the Palouse River. And one aspect of restorative agriculture is participating with the natural world. So considering the environment and our responsibility to the environment as opposed to exploitive methods that ultimately could damage the land. And so we consider education, economic, social, and personal goals all in respect to each other. We also look at the capacity of landscapes to promote healthy soil for production of crops. This is an exploitive endeavor. We think that's a good thing for humanity's benefit, but can we find ways that would reduce artificial inputs? Because we also think that's in the best interests of health in the land. And finally, to promote and document the diversity of local landscapes in natural flora and fauna. Are there things that we can be doing to live in concert and cooperation with natural grasslands and native flora and fauna? The question we raised a few minutes ago was about the relevance of all this in terms of flavor profiles and nutritive analysis. And so a few things I'd like to share with you that came from a recent USDA report. One is that the heritage grains across the board, and I have one slide here that'll go into a little more detail on this, have higher mineral levels than modern cultivars, particularly iron, magnesium, and the others I list. Fuller bran level, and we know bran is good for you. Significant genetic variation of disease resistance. The heirlooms stand up, and in fact they are used to defeat grain diseases in other parts of the world. A very famous one in Africa about a dozen years ago. They have distinct culinary attributes. Yeah, when you think about this, we're great pancake lovers in the Scheuerman family. It's one of the few things my wife allows me to cook. I'm the designated pancake guy. And so actually, you're all welcome to come to our place this weekend because everybody else in the family is showing up at our place after church on Sunday. Because Grandpa is going to make French crepes.
Oh, we're going to go.
Yeah.
We'll be right there.
Mary, you're going to come. Now, here's the thing. My background is German. You can tell by my name. I'm a sauerkraut lover. And so we have a tradition of pancake making. They're enormous. They're like a crepe. And, you really got to practice to flip that thing without breaking it. But our people are from Eastern Europe. They're Germans who lived in the Volga region. Yeah, and so we bring with us this old saying, "Perve blinke blom," which I'll roughly translate for you. The first blini is a disaster. That's what it means. Because when you flip that first one, you got to have the pan just hot enough, you got to have enough butter on there. And I'm very proud to tell you that in recent years, my first blinis actually have been worth eating. I saved my first ones, but when the kids try to make them, yes, it's a kablooey, it's a disaster. Well, when you think about it, okay, so French crepes. What is a French crepe? Is a French crepe just French crepe because we call it that? You can buy crepe flour. Is that really a French grain in there? You can buy a wheat. There's a wheat tortilla maker here, not very far from us. You know what? There really was a Sonora grain. We raise Sonora. That's a tortilla grain. What is really, that's why I use this phrase, flavorful authenticity. If I have a French crepe, I want French grain in there. Maybe it doesn't keep you up at night, and I have to tell you, it probably doesn't keep me up at night. But I believe in flavorful authenticity. If I have a wheat tortilla, I'd like it to be with Sonora. Call me crazy, but I think that's important. For English pancakes, I'm interested in using our white llamas. I want the original Hudson Bay, Walla Walla Valley grain. I just think it's a great story, and I believe in favorable authenticity. I think some of these people are missing the boat because they put labels on stuff that have nothing to do with what's really there. There really was Scotch white oat. It's available. You can go to the USDA Germ Supply Center and find it. I'm grateful for First Lady Michelle Obama. She got a hold of our Lincoln oats and decided to plant them at the White House because she had been told how important it is for children in school to have whole grains. It makes a big difference in their health, and our world is exploding with children that have dietary problems, as you know, to some extent because they're not eating healthy. Here's what our ancestors brought from Russia, Turkey red. If I told you there were no breads in America before the 1870s, obviously you'd be right for laughing at me. People did eat bread in colonial days and after colonial days. But you know what? There was no hard red grain. There was no hard red bread wheat in the United States until German immigrants brought it to Kansas and Nebraska in the 1870s. You can make bread with soft white wheat, but it is dense. Some say brick-like. We use soft white wheat for good purposes, scones and pancakes and biscuits and all kinds of those things. But if you want, the classic bread loaf, then, we use hard white and hard red grains. Here's French Tusawa. I got a few kernels from the USDA. There they are. So, that's waiting for somebody. If you're young and looking to make a fortune, I'm giving you the chance right now. Go find French Tusawa and raise it, because then you'd have the real French grape grain. And by the way, for all I know, private selection, okay, that's got to be a Safeway product. I hope it tastes good, and I'm happy for those people, but I'm not aware that they really got any French soft white or red wheat in there. Some people get this. Amy Halloran is a New York baker. People like her, people like Dan Barber at the Rockefeller Stone Barn Center in New York, Glenn Roberts in the Carolinas, they're in these high-end restaurants that care about doing things right. And we've been guests in Amy's home, and guess what? She wants to make French crepes with French crepe grain, and boy, is it delicious. And there is one. Sonora, there were wheats that were raised in the American West. In the South, grain came up from Mexico from the time of Columbus. And that's the Sonora grains that were in what is today Mexico, Southern California, New Mexico. And here is my great hope that, yes, whole wheat tortillas might actually be made from that someday. We've been working with some friends up on the Colville Reservation to resurrect Sonora. How are we doing on time here? Grover? Cascadia, are we okay? Yeah, I need to give you a 1 minute bird walk on this because, commodity growers are paid a premium today for hard white meat. Okay, one of the complaints, of course, of hard red grains is that, it's brown and, makes a more of a brandy product.
It's more of a what product?
Brandy.
Oh.
Yeah. And of course, soft whites don't have the same quality for raising, for normal yeast bread. So once in a very rare moment in time, Mother Nature makes a hard white. So you can have a high quality bread wheat, but it's naturally like flour. Today, we hybridize for hard white. I got to thinking, there's got to be a hard white landrace, original grain out there somewhere. And it just kept coming up dry. And eventually, I found a report that, in fact, this was about 120 years ago, one of the USDA plant explorers was in what is today Iraq and was knocking on doors, collecting samples and running out of time like I'm doing, and said to somebody, well, just tell me where the best grain is. And who's got it? They went to this grain market. Oh, go down here, turn left at the bazaar, and Abdul is sitting there with a little bag, and everybody knows it's there. So, okay, so he goes down, gets a sample, and he asks the guy, what's so special about this? He says, it's from the Garden of Eden. Everybody knows that. And I'm sure he thought to himself, yeah, right, okay. Puts a little in the bottle, and Gets back to Washington, D.C., months later, and they're testing all these grains. And he gets the report back. It's a hard, white, natural landrace. They do exist. So we called up our good buddies at WSU. Can you find a few kernels of that? And does it even exist still? This is probably 120 years ago. More than that, now I'm thinking about it. Hey, it's got to be there. The USDA does not lose stuff. Sorry to report, about a month later, I get a call. For whatever reason, no. They have it on their records, but it has not been increased. So I was really disappointed. And I said to our good friend Steve Lyon there, who's a good Eastern Washington farm kid working for WSU, we've got to cast a wider net. This is too great of a story. Somebody must have kept this somewhere. And very happy to report, another month goes by, I get a phone call. You'll never believe it, Richard, but there's a seed-saving group in France that has that same accession from 120, 130 years ago. So that's it. It's growing right there. We call it Amber Eden. Now, good question about minerals, vitamins. What is it about heritage grains that makes them special? I'm violating every good rule of PowerPoints by putting all this condensed information there. You're only supposed to have a few numbers and words. Okay, so true confessions, there's way more. This is a comparison of modern hybrids to primitive grains, what we call primitive grains, emmer, einkorn. Those are not actually true wheats. Those are pre-wheats. Healthy, good, but they're genetically different. The land races and older varieties that were pulled from land races and pre-hybridized, but grew through scientific increase. And if you look on this chart, you'll notice everything that is in red is the highest concentration of that particular mineral in the analysis. And the reason I colored them is because modern hybrids do not have a single leading category. We can talk about reasons for that later if you're interested, but I found that intriguing. Some that are extremely important to good health. You can look at them here: manganese, selenium, iron, all the rest. Well, what are some implications of that for our day and age? If you can do this with bread, so you can do this with brewing and distilling. And some people are doing that. This is Skagit Valley malting over north of Seattle with some purple Egyptian. Our ancestors also raised colored barleys in Eastern Europe and Russia. And so we've been able to revive this. How do we participate today? What's the 21st century relevance of this? Well, local activism, just learning about things. You and I are both here doing things like this, learning from each other. I've learned things just this afternoon being here. What the importance of recycling, responsible consumption, seeking nutritious foods. It's one thing to know about it and visit with kids and the greater public, but it's another thing to step out of the car and, might have to pay a few cents extra to get Tom's good grain and the right flour and make it happen. Buy locally grown foods whenever possible. Support our local farmers markets. And finally, political advocacy. Learn from retailers and food producers about crop raising, product origins, and what happens to them over time. This is a big issue right now with the current administration and changes with ag policy and food safety concerns. I've tried to summarize some of these things in a couple of books I've worked on. Palouse Heritage, which tells about these crops here, specifically in the Pacific Northwest. By the way, that was not my choice for a cover. I wanted like the old pole combine you have here in the museum. That was to me Harvest Heritage, but I got overruled by my friends at WSU Press. And it is a nice image, I have to say. John Clement is my good photographer friend. This has been my latest quest, which is writing about the significance of agrarian experience in great art and literature. The writings of Leo Tolstoy, the paintings of Andrew Wyeth, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And they're fascinating to me. And so I've recently completed a 3-volume work, in which the first one is Hallowed Harvest, which I saw you have a couple copies of here in the bookstore. So thank you for supporting that. By the way, I just love this picture. This is I actually think this might be one I took. I've taken John to Europe and to Russia with me when you could travel there. And this is a life-size painting. So these people are, like 5-6 feet tall. This painting would be pretty much cover this entire wall up here. You can just walk into this thing. And of course my dad would not have approved of this thistle. But look what's happening. There's bugs flying around there. It's healthy. When you look to have food growing systems that promote respect for the land, you're going to find that it's not always 100% weed free. But here it tells a story. This is a famous Russian artist named Massageddov. And he's telling you a story here about family solidarity and how young and old can participate together. Here's the senior reaper. By the way, look, he's got a grain crown that he's tied around his head. And, members of the family, young to old. And so I've had great fun exploring these issues and deconstructing what I can of their meaning. And it's been a great adventure. Finally, progressive change to promote the well-being of the land in future generations can be unwisely limited by amnesia as well as nostalgia. Amnesia is to forget about cultural legacies bequeathed by ancestors and society. Nostalgic appeals to life in some halcyon past often overlook the challenges of such times. We're not suggesting through heritage appreciation and approaches that we just wind the clock back forever. We appreciate progress. But memory is the critical discipline. We remember places, mark scriptures, appropriate elders' counsel in order to foster human flourishing and stewardship of resources for tomorrow. I'm grateful to be with an audience that's here because you care about these things with me and us together. And I look forward to directions ahead as we forge the next chapter in this exciting story. So thanks again for the chance to come and be with you today. If you have, a question, we'll get a few.
That one picture you took, Russian red.
Yes.
But you had in parentheses Turkey. Why Turkey?
Yeah, good question, because American consumers got their geography mixed up. They called it Turkey red because they knew it was from southeastern Europe. It's actually from Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they misnamed it. It is truly, in Russia it's called Crimean red. But that is why. It was a misname. It was brought in the 1870s to Kansas and Nebraska. And concurrent with the introduction of Turkey red was the invention of steel hammer mills. Because the first people that tried to mill it in the Midwest found it very hard on their equipment. I mean, it is literally a hard red. And so it would break pieces of the equipment. And of course, these immigrant farmers said, well, but try the flavor, try the bread, it's worth it. And so fortunately, the steel hammer mills were also invented in the 1870s and 1880s, and that could mill the grain properly. But yeah, good question.
Australia grows a lot of hard white.
Yes,
And we've been trying to increase hard white to compete with their export.
that's right. Yeah, interesting. I've wondered about that. There had been effort, there was a big push about 20 years ago here in eastern Washington or eastern Oregon to introduce hard white. But you have to have enough people sign up, to push a shipload to China and Japan. And unfortunately, they didn't get enough. I think it's an opportunity, and so I'm interested that you'd say that, because I think that's out there as a high-value crop. I do. Yeah.
On your inputs, do you use anything that's conventional fertilizers or herbicides?
We don't use anhydrous ammonia, but we use dry fertilizer. And we don't use hot herbicides. We don't use Roundup, glyphosate. But if it's a weed issue, we'll 2,4-D, something like that. If it's a problem in the field, we're wanting to transition to organic. American consumers don't seem to recognize this ag in the middle premium opportunity. It's either organic or conventional, and there's a lot of good effort. Tom, you probably know way more about this than me, but I mean, there's been good efforts by good people to try to get folks to understand the value of that. But it's difficult when you're in the commodity world.
Well, currently it's more in the regenerative, non-organic.
Yes.
So regenerative organic would be, I guess, near the top of the scale.
Right.
But if you don't have the organic part, try to do the regenerative and
Yes.
alpha commercial situation.
Yeah. Jim?
Well, I'll reveal my ignorance here, but I guess yields are much higher now than they were many years ago per acre, is that right?
Yeah.
So the question I guess I have is whatever we've done, and I don't know what all the things are that have done that, how would you balance out the benefit versus the harm maybe? I mean, as far as nutritional quality, the harvest and things like that, I'm curious.
Well, and that's the basis of the chart. Those were done on equal farming regimes, and so even with that, it still shows that the heritage grains have higher vitamin and mineral levels. There's no doubt about the fact that if you put that many pounds of nitrogen in the soil, you're going to get a bigger yield, and it's just the price you pay.
Another question, do we have a lot of diversity in the strains that are grown by farmers around the region?
It's sort of a question like compared to what? 100 years ago, when there were probably 1,000 varieties raised, compared to today, when you look at the charts today on grains that are available, seed suppliers, I mean, there's a couple hundred choices, but that's far less.
Everybody wants to know what makes the most money, but it isn't good if you don't have diversity, because if something comes along that's, a pest.
It's a concern. And part of the concern is proprietary ownership now of these things, and farmers being able to maintain their own seed stocks. Anything else?
Where should we buy your flour?
Oh, my son Carl is marketing on PalouseHeritage.com. Do son Carl a favor and order a box of grain or something. I'm subbing for him. He was supposed to be here, but I'm very proud to tell you my son is a cyber warrior, and as fascinated as he is in agricultural history, he is overperforming military duty this week, so he couldn't be here. But thanks, Grover. And I think some of the books and things are available too on the website. And I encourage you to take a look. And a lot of information beyond what I was able to share with you here. I should have brought a loaf of bread. You could have stuck around and done that. But thanks again. Great to be with you. Have a good week. Yep.